Welcome to the Next Practices podcast. I'm Katie Oliveira. In this episode, I'm talking with Dr. Jeffrey Taylor, Director of Academic Advising at the University of Texas at Arlington, College of Nursing, and Health Innovation. We discuss how his team uses technology and actionable analytics to holistically serve nursing students from 18 to 70, online and in person from all over the country, including both nurses pursuing undergraduate and graduate degrees, as well as other healthcare professions. But before we dive in, take a moment to subscribe to the show to stay up to date on the latest creative data-informed approaches to student success. So Jeff, welcome to Next Practices. I'm so happy you're able to join me today.
Yeah, Katie, thanks for having me.
So let's dive in to first just kind of understanding a little bit more about you and your institution. So if you could tell me about University of Texas, Arlington College of Nursing and Health Innovation, how it serves its mission and your role in it, I think that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I am Jeff Taylor. I am the Director of Academic Advising for the College of Nursing and Health Innovation at UT Arlington. And just as a note, that is something that's really hard to type every time. Like I have to introduce myself to somebody. It's like 2 lines, we try to get it. We're big on acronyms in higher ed, but that's who I am and where we are. And the College of Nursing and Health Innovation, which I'm going to go ahead and say is Con High, just for the sake of, we want this podcast to be under 3 hours, I think. So I'll start saying Con High instead. We serve students that want to go into the field of nursing and also kinesiology. And we have undergraduate, graduate programs, from bachelor's programs all the way up to doctorate level programs that we serve. Within our college, the advising piece, student services piece, is done in one office called the Office of Enrollment and Student Services. And we work with 4 different student populations here. So really what we're doing in-house is we're trying to hit every possible angle we can for our students and what they need and what their academic and career interests are. And so it's a lot of variety, a lot of different approaches, and a lot of different needs that we're having to take into account.
One of the things that I remember from a previous conversation that we had a couple of months ago when you were sharing some of the work that you're doing is you're sharing that a large percentage of your population is not necessarily housed on your campus, that you have students from across the country, that many students are participating in your program online. Do you mind sharing just a little bit more about that piece of your department?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do. So I guess this will be if I can kind of give you a nice little framework of what we all do, kind of what students we serve and where they are, because a lot of the unique circumstances we find ourselves in are based on who our students are, where they are, and what they're looking for. So our office handles 4 different student groups, and I'm just going to kind of run through them a little quick so everyone kind of has an idea of what's here. So our first group is undergraduate students seeking a degree in the field of kinesiology. So these are folks that want to go be PE teachers. They want to be trainers, go on to occupational therapy school, physical therapy school, things of that nature. Public health also falls under that. We have a bachelor's of science in public health program. So for students that are wanting to go into the field of public health and service, they can study through this department and do that. And we service these folks right here as well. Most of those students are on campus in this population, although our public health program does have an exclusively online component as well, that for students in the state of Texas that they can sign up and take there. So we have students across the state in all major metropolitan areas taking those courses. And then we get into our nursing piece, which is where all the fun is. So we have our traditional BSN nursing program, the Bachelor of Science in Nursing. And this is for the students that come in and basically say, I want to go to nursing school. So they don't have any level of experience necessarily as a nurse. They come in, they complete all their courses, they do their clinicals, they get their BSN degree, they go and sit for their licensure to become a registered nurse. So they come out of it with an RN and a BSN degree. So that's one group. So that also has an online component, mainly on campus. We have a significant online portion that's also throughout the state of Texas. Then we have another BSN program for students that already have an RN licensure. So that's interesting, as students can go to a community college and get their associate's degree in nursing, and that allows them to sit for the RN license exam. So these are practicing RNs that just want to finish that bachelor's degree component. And so they come to us and they can finish that. That one is almost entirely online. We have a small campus population that meets locally on our Fort Worth campus. But for the most part, 98 to 99% of our students are online, and that's across the United States. I think we can operate with RN to BSN. I think there's only like a small handful of states that we aren't authorized to work in. So we have students all the way from California all the way to the East Coast as well, just spread out all around, all online. And then we have our graduate nursing programs, which are the Masters of Science in Nursing for folks that want to go be nurse practitioners, nurse educators, nurse administrators, and we have a Doctor of Nursing Practice program as well. And that can also be nationwide. Our nurse practitioner programs have a little more limitation, but our nurse education, nurse admin folks can be in most of the states around as well. So we have a substantial team of advisors that are very specialized in each population. We have 4 different advising teams that work with these students. And we have students that come in person and students that are online. So it's a lot of moving pieces there as we're trying to get folks where they need to go. But it is the online component is something that when I started here was something new for me as well, to kind of get exposed to and figure out how to work around and work with.
It sounds like you're working with a very broad, diverse group of students from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of demographic locations, and I assume ages and different places in their professional experience and career. Is that correct?
And there's folks, that are coming in that, 18, 19 years old that are just fresh out of high school, ready to do their thing, the traditional college student. And then we have folks that, married with a couple of kids, trying to, continue their further education. And we have folks, in their 60s and 70s wanting to still finish a degree or keep moving as well. So it is a veritable cornucopia of demographics that we're working with, and it's pretty exciting.
And I think you alluded to, or you read my mind of my next question of getting a little bit into how you've structured your advising team to serve such a cornucopia of students and programs.
It is, and it's interesting because it's a fun component, and it really kind of speaks to kind of what we try to do, because every student population has different needs. They have different goals. There's different things going on. Like an undergraduate student that wants to get their BSN that has no nursing experience has very different needs than a student that's been a practicing RN for 25 years trying to get their BSN. And so you have really 2 different folks that are theoretically taking similar courses, trying to get that exact same degree, but they have very different needs. One of them may be local, lives in Dallas, has never lived out of the Metroplex, whereas the RN to BSN student may live in Southern California and has no intention of ever setting foot in Texas. So you get folks that just are a little bit different. So figuring out how to build these things up is and set our teams accordingly is interesting, because we have folks in our office that have the very same job titles that do very different things. So we have an academic advisor or an admissions advisor on one team handles things a lot differently than another. And some of that is built on the way UT Arlington has specifically set aside the admissions processing a little bit, or how they identify current students. Not to get too much into the weeds here on this, but as an undergrad RN to BSN student, they come in to us as an intended major till we review and confirm that they meet these certain requirements. But as this intended student, they are considered admitted to the university, and so they're in this weird space between where they're admitted but not really, but they're considered a current admitted student. So our current advisors on that team are working with these already admitted students to make sure they're processed and moving on. Whereas on the graduate side, this is not technical at all. They come over to us on our side, and we have an admissions team that actually goes through and verifies multiple admissions requirements, and then we are actually offering the admission to the graduate students. So those admissions advisors are actually doing the work of admissions. Whereas on the other side, they are, but the students already admit. It's more of a program admission versus university admission. So being able to line out each thing, and our teams are great. I love them all. I was hired to oversee originally the graduate advising team. And so then picked up a few other teams here and there, but really they each take on their own unique cultures as well. So we do group full office team meetings, but having those individual squads, for lack of a better term, meeting together, and they take on the importance of the relevance of their student population.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's a really intelligent may not be the right word. It's a really strategic, thoughtful approach, intentional approach to making sure that students who are kind of in different places and in different pathways have the support that makes sense for them in their program and where they're going.
Yeah, it's interesting because you want to put people in the best place to succeed. So just as a note, it's and now as a director, as more of a manager, I don't get as much direct student facing. I love it. I get the angry students, so I always tell my team, like, my opinions are skewed a lot of times because I get the folks that are particularly upset about a policy or a decision or an error or anything of that nature. So I get to work with a lot of those students, and that's really fun. I love talking to students. But you really want to put them and your teams in a good place to be successful. And so one thing we do, we have an open phone every day. So we have folks that advisors, they'll just answer the phone. The student they can make an appointment if they want, but they can just call in and talk to an advisor. They may have to wait a few minutes if all the lines are occupied, but they can talk to an advisor and get their answers sorted whenever they want. Some do prefer the appointments, but so it's one of the expectations of certain teams is you got to be on call. You got to be available on the phones, and not everybody is as strong on phones. Again, it goes back to playing on people's strengths. And so figuring out what can you do, where is your value, where is your strength there? Because I mean, some work is stuff you're just going to have to do. Like I'm not going to take you off the phones altogether because we got to answer the phones. But like, are there certain ways we can measure and put you in places to be successful? Because again, the whole goal is trying to get everybody where they need to go. And that's including our students, that's including our staff, whoever it is.
Yeah, I think with such a broad, diverse group of students that you're working with, I'm sure there are several different kinds of challenges that they're facing. But I wonder, are there a couple that kind of float to the top, a couple of top student success challenges that you're seeing or patterns that you're seeing that your team is working to solve?
There's always something. I feel like it's always we want to work ourselves out of a job, but it is kind of a fun little job security. There's always going to be some challenges that arise. And so I think there's a few different ones here. One is just having the online student themselves. And it's fairly easy. Our campus-based students, we put a hold on their account every semester. They're required to have an advising appointment. So that's fairly easy to do. They have to come see us before they register. It's a good conversation piece. It's a good placeholder to get them to figure out where they're going and what it is they're wanting to do. It's a good check-in. Our online students, because we have literally thousands of them, it's not really feasible to require them to see an advisor before they register. So registration is just kind of open for them, not open in the sense they don't have to see an advisor before they register when it comes up. So figuring out what that is and making them have that connection with us is really there. Because again, we don't want them just floating out there in the ether. Like if somebody's here, they're one of our students, I want to make sure that they feel welcomed and connected. And so making sure those online students have that connection is important. So we've done some things over the years to try to do that. And really, this kind of goes back to, a little bit of Alexander Aston, old higher ed theorist. He had the IEO model, the input, environment, and output. The input is what students bring in that we have no control over. It's just who they are. They're just bringing their personhood to us. And the environment is kind of what we provide for them. And the O is is the output of what they graduate. They go off and do great things. And what can we do on that E level to help them? And so for us, it's like trying to figure out the key points of development. One of my backgrounds is human development. So looking at kind of like seeing a college student's existence as a college student as part of a life. So, birth is a key element there, the early childhood, as it were. So as a new student coming in, if we don't onboard them well, if we don't give them any information there, then we're going to be, again, they feel unmoored, and then it's creating more work for us on the back end. Just as an example, so we did create, it's been right around the time when the pandemic was going on, we created some twice daily live orientation sessions that we do via Zoom, or Teams or something of that nature. So we bounce back and forth on them, but essentially it was every day because we have rolling enrollments for our students. We have 8 dates a year which our students can begin the program. So we've always got new students coming in and just trying to get them moving. And so how do you kind of work with those folks? And so for us was like, we need time for them to get FaceTime with an advisor, with one of the assistant directors, somebody on a day-to-day basis where they can show up. We go over some basic information for them and give them, and allow that little bit of connection to go forth. And so we had each of our online teams were doing these sessions every day. And so then we eventually kind of moved it to just once a day to make it a little more manageable on our end. But to make a long story short, we ran these numbers, or had our university analytics run these numbers, and it turned out that had a positive impact on persistence. Just that by itself had a positive impact versus those that did not attend, because it wasn't required. So we've taken that now though, and have partnered with the university orientation department, and they're doing a little more now where students can do it at their own pace, but also now they're learning more about UTA as a whole and not just specifically their nursing program, because these are UTA students. They may never set foot in Texas, but they are our students. They are Mavericks, and we want them to be here with us. So little things like that, like trying to make sure they're connected and identifying guideposts through the program. Ideally we'll use different programs. We'll use some Civitas programs as well to do some outreach and run some numbers, but identifying the critical points throughout that student's life cycle, roughly halfway through their first course, giving them a check-in and a reminder of information. You get information at orientation, and your brain is so full of things, you don't even know what to ask. It doesn't make any sense. But let them get their feet wet a little bit, and then giving them more information. And then picking another class and doing the same thing, and kind of reaching out and touching them as many times as we can. Because what I found was that for certain programs, especially, students would show up and here's your degree plan, here's your classes, go be great. And that would be it. And so students are emailing, calling back, well, what about this class? How about that? And just with multiple questions. So we improved what we were giving them at the beginning, giving them an FAQ with a lot of information about, here's the classes. If you think you transferred this class in, here's how you fix it. Trying to anticipate questions. If you get the same question 12 times, it's annoying. So why don't you do something to try to fix it on the front end? And, that's super pragmatic. But again, it's like so you don't know how many questions you've prevented by doing this one thing, but you know that, hey, we're trying to give people as much information as possible. Most of our students are working nurses. They're busy. They've got a lot going on. So just giving it to them where they can pull it up on their phone at their convenience and look at it and read it and understand it. And I think that's really been helpful with the challenges.
It sounds like you're really intentional about taking a proactive approach to supporting your students, making sure they're connected, making sure that they are part of the larger UTA community, that they have a point person that they can go to for support. That also sounds like you have a lot of students. So how are you managing that workload and that capacity load for your advising teams? Like, what's the ratio of your caseload, and how are your teams using different technology systems to manage that big what I'm assuming might be a pretty sizable caseload.
It is. It's substantial. It is above the preferred recommended caseload put forth by NACADA, the National Academic Advising Association. It's a lot of students. We have a lot of advisors, fortunately. So we're in the process here of transitioning in a new way on this. So traditionally, what we have done is we've done just a straight up group advising model. So the students would have each advising team has a specific email address. The students would send an email to that, and it would go to an advising queue for the whole advising team to answer. Whoever the first advisor was to get it, they'd handle it, move on, and go on with our lives. So worked very well. It was like it worked very, very nicely. It's very efficient. But I have found over time, and I think anybody listening to this, I'm sure you know this as well, people working with people is not an efficient process. It's just not. You can be super efficient with the person. You could give them everything they need, everything they want, and they could still leave that interaction feeling like they're missing something. They can feel like that there's something that just wasn't quite right, that they just felt like you were just a person, just not, there was nothing there. So trying to figure out what that piece is. I was doing some manual labor one time many years ago. This is a real quick a side note here. But we were repairing a building in Los Angeles, and part of it involved painting it. And this building had the bars on the windows to protect everything from people from damaging the windows. And I was tasked with removing these bars from these windows so people could pay, because you didn't want to just kind of paint around it. That's not, you want to do a good job. But all the screws that were in there were the type of screws that you couldn't unscrew. Again, makes sense. It's security. They're trying to make sure these bars are staying there. So I was having to work out a way to get these screws out. And day by day, I'm taking these little screws out. I'm having to cut little holes and do all these things. I'm making very slow progress, too slow progress, because we almost got to the last day and like 3 of the windows were still up. So a couple of guys came by with crowbars and popped them out and painted and moved on. Well, the problem was you couldn't put the bars back on because the whole thing just came out of the wall. So it was ruined. And so I just always thought of that as I was working with people, like it's messy, it takes a while, it's intricate, but if you go too fast, if you just bowl over them, you're gonna ruin something that could work. I'm all about developing relationships. And so for me, that's always a piece about working with people, is having that relationship. And so we've looked at some ways forward, and we are transitioning to more of a case management model with what's kind of blended with group advising, in the sense that every student is going to be assigned one advisor, which is pretty normal to do. But we're also going to have it to where in our system where each of the students, let me pause there, where the advisors at that point will take ownership of that particular group of students. So if it involves outreach, like I mentioned, the first class, second class, coming up on graduation, the students on probation, whatever's going on of concern, that advisor owns, for lack of a better term, that the outreach for that student. So that's the way we're going to kind of build that connection there. Send an email with the advisors, do a little video introduction, a picture, things like just kind of build that connection. Because again, people just see a name in an email and they think, oh, this person, I don't know who this person is. Is this even a real person? Once you know who somebody is, it's a lot easier to work with them and kind of figure out what's going on and find that common ground. So we're doing that part. And now, on the other side, that we are going to have as a group backup, because again, say you're one of our advisors, Katie, and let's say you're sick for a week. That sounds pretty awful, that you're going to come back after feeling miserable and sick for a week, and then you have 200 emails waiting specifically for you to answer. That's not sustainable either. So we've got it set up to where we're going to use our email system that we have, but to where, in theory, if you're out, I'm out, whoever is out, then another team member can step in and assist and help that advisor lessen their load a little bit while they're out, kind of helping lift one another up, and also getting the student the answer, because the student doesn't know you're sick. I mean, I'm sure they would care that you're sick, but ultimately they're just looking for an answer for their question or concern. And so if they're still getting the answer, they're going to work with it that way. So trying to build that connection is really what we're working on now. And it's there's going to be more nuance to come on this because we've got it kind of set, and you can only work with the resources that you have. We've got good people, we have good students, we have mostly good systems. And so, but we're going to see as we move into this, as it gets certain points, there will be probably some parts of weakness that we're going to look at and have to figure out how do we work around that given what limitations we've got. And so that'll be interesting to see. So far, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good system and it's worked well so far. But we all know not everything is 100% sustainable, and there'll be some tweaks we're going to have to make. But that's kind of what we're here for.
In a case management model, I think it makes sense that there's like a case management model, and that we're centering relationship building with our students, being able to proactively engage with them, but also recognize that we have a significant volume of students. Humans get sick, humans go on vacation, like they have meetings, they have all kinds of things, and that having group mechanisms for serving students and in different ways, like kind of having a mixed model, so to speak, I think makes a whole lot of sense. I know as folks transition to more case management based, proactive based models, it can be really challenging to scale those kinds of approaches when you have a high volume of students, just because there's only so many hours in a day, and humans, like you were saying, you want to be, in your analogy, that you want to be, sometimes you have to be more surgical. I don't love using that word, but you need to be precise, and
Sure.
you need to, you don't want to rip the bars off and take all the stucco with it. And then where you left is right, you want to be precise in your interaction. So that being said, I know that it can be tricky as a former advisor coming in my day, and, oftentimes I serve the student who were sitting in my lobby crying, and who had filled up my inbox first, hand raisers who made themselves really known, and that those students needed help in the moment, but they weren't necessarily the student who was least likely to persist or who was really struggling secretly and quietly on their own. So how are your advisors, especially in an online environment, we are asked this a lot, gaining visibility into students' needs, making sure that they are connecting with those students who might not be hand raisers, connecting with those students who might be kind of hiding in the corner and saying, "No, look at me, I'm just checking along here." How are they sort of identifying that and then managing their caseloads in such a way that they can have the capacity to serve their full range of needs that come along with having a caseload?
Sure. No, that's a good one. That's kind of that's my favorite group of people too. Those that they're not skating by. That's not the right word, but they're there, but there is a certain risk because there seems to be a certain lack of engagement, maybe. Now, here's what's interesting, and this is getting a little more philosophical here, is not every student wants to be engaged. Some students, I can tell you with some of our students that we have, they're like, just tell me what classes to take, just make it easy for me to register, get out of my way, and let me go get my degree. And you know what? We say, go be great. Like we're in. Like we're going to give you exactly what you want to. I think it's trying to find a way to meet the expectations of each student. Happiness is a function of realistic expectations. So it's getting them to say like, oh, yeah, because we've all had advising in the past, and I had, my undergrad, I had great advisors. So I kind of had that context and knew what was going on. Into grad school, it wasn't as ideal, but it's kind of one of those things. But I knew what I was doing at that point and could advocate for myself and figure out things as we're going along there. So I think really understanding who they are is really important. So for those students, every student reaches out to us eventually, and if they don't, they're usually fine. We usually have some outreach, or we definitely reach out to students at least once a semester, all students. And every once in a while, we'll at least get one from any student in a given semester, I'd say, for the most part, except those that are really like, boom, 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 I'm good. Just stay out of my way and let me do my thing. So what happens is though, but you have students that can communicate what they need and some that can't, and some that are trying to communicate what they need, but they don't have the language or the vocabulary to tell you what they need. And so as a good example here, this is a common one that comes up is we'll have a student send an email that says, um, I need to drop my class. But that's really all it says. It's like an email that looks like a text message. I need to drop my class. And let's say the drop deadline passed a week ago, whatever it was, just picking a random idea here. Now, as an advisor, as a professional, you could look at that email and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. The drop deadline has passed. Good luck." And you could leave it at that. And you're literally answering the question the student asked. But there's unwritten questions there in that email as well. Why do you need to drop? What's going on with your life? What are some options? There's a whole swath of conversations you could have beyond that the student may not even know they can ask. They don't know if they should ask. They may feel embarrassed. And sometimes you have to be the one to bring those things up, not call it out, but at least just kind of draw attention to it. And so getting that out of them and getting some information, some answers works. Half the time, I'd say we don't get a response on that. They'll just be like, "Oh, just never mind. Don't worry about it. I'll be okay." And then we find out a year later that their parent passed away or some significant tragedy. Um, like people have different ways of coping with stress and situations like that. So I would say for us, it's doing the touch for everybody, but also when the student is reaching out, make sure we're comprehensively answering what they need and also what they might not need. So it could be a student that's in their final class. They're asking a question about the final class or registering, but they haven't applied to graduate. Making sure you're hitting all these little points while you're there. Because again, you may not get to talk to them again. They may not reach out again. So kind of at least giving them a point of reference where they can reach back and do those things. Because people don't always know to reach out. Like, some people, it's not even a matter of shame. I think it's just a matter of some people just don't know what to ask always. And in giving them as much information as they can, I think is important. Now, make sure you're answering the first question always. Make sure what they're actually wanting to know, you're telling them. But kind of giving that extra look to everything and make sure things are there is really important as well. Yeah, I'd say that's it.
Yeah, I think students are interesting, right? Because they don't even always know what help is available. So they don't know to ask because they're asking for the thing that they need and they don't know that there's greater support behind the person they're asking potentially.
And it gets kind of hypocritical of us too. I may preach here for a second. So it's funny because they may not know what to ask. They may not know the resources. So we provide resources. We'll send them these emails with all this information, and they'll call and ask a question. Sounds like very much like faculty, well, it's in the syllabus. That's the only response the faculty will provide. It's in the syllabus. Well, it's in our welcome email. It's in this document. Instead of just answering the question again, because I'm like, I've got people here and I'm guilty of it. I've had people ask me, "Hey, did you see that email from so and so?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't really read it. Like I saw it, but I kind of skimmed it, And we're not all, none of us are reading every email as thoroughly as the Bible. We're not getting in here and getting it chapter and verse lined out as we should. So allowing a little grace for our students and just answering the question again is fine. For me, it's like there's no deficit in just answering the question again. Maybe you feel like, "Oh my gosh, you should read this again." That's fine, but answer the question and copy that welcome letter to it again and say, "Here's your answer, but just in case you missed it, here's where you can find this information moving forward as well." So, but we all kind of do it. It's not always ideal, but it is a fact of life.
Yeah, giving grace, it takes many, many times doing something for it to really sink in too, I think. Well, I know that you team is doing a lot in moving to a case management system, helping your students, helping a large, diverse population of students in person and online. And especially with your online students, but also with your in-person students, what kind of technology and processes are you using to do this work? And I know just for context, often different folks that I've talked to over the years around doing this work. There are folks who meet weekly to look at the data and to identify populations that are at risk and to triage potential solutions. They're getting everybody on board across the institution, across the department program around a unified philosophy of student success, folks forming committees, implementing technology systems, making sure that they're looking at data regularly. There's a whole slew of different things that folks are doing to help make this work feasible. And I wonder what does that look like at UT Arlington?
It's all over the place. We got a little bit of everything going on. And so we specifically, I mean, we pull data on a regular basis. So for our rolling start dates, I'll just say this again, going back to the online, you mentioned campus, I'll do some for them too, but for our online students, we get grades every 5 to 6 weeks for certain courses, depending on when they finish. So as students are successful or not successful in those classes, they're getting outreach at that point as well. They're getting a touch from us with information. And we actually we have them complete a small survey. It's optional. I wish we could just completely require it, but we can't. That allows them to share information about what happened with their grades, kind of where things went awry. And the most interesting thing is it's never necessarily about the course material was too difficult. It's never really, oh my gosh, the professor was a jerk. It's the biggest answers are typically, there is some family stress going on, some sicknesses, or they're working 40 plus hours a week. Again, these are nurses with crazy hours. So time poverty is a real thing. They've got not enough time on their plate to do everything that they need to do. And so having that conversation with students is really important. So we run these numbers on a regular basis. Every semester, we're pulling academic standing. Our students that are on probation, either with the university or with our departmental policies, we set them apart in a separate learning management software platform that's a specific probation advising platform. So we move them over there. They have different modules to complete over the first 6 weeks of the new semester. It's very mild things. It's more self-reflection, understanding of policy, to keep them moving forward before the next registration date opens up. So moving folks over there and getting them involved in that has been super important. We've seen some pretty good conclusions from doing some of that, to the point where we're considering doing something large scale for all of our students in an LMS, where we have a complete advising structure there of resources, message boards, and things for our students, like where they're enrolled in a class with our advisors in there, with all the forms, documents, anything they might need as a resource, that we could also push announcements and things out. Because again, they're in there taking their classes. That's another way we can really touch them and get them connected with us. So that's what we're kind of looking at. But number-wise, we are using some Civitas programming as well to connect, especially with the case management piece, being able to pull our students by last name, by major, and these different demographics, to make sure that each advisor is reaching out to them, their specific group. They can keep track of them and understand kind of the unique background. I think that's been the big win, is with using that program, because in the past it was always the advisors were asking me or another supervisor, could you pull a report about X or something? Can you give us this information? And I can. Excuse me, I'm happy to. It's part of my job, right? But having it in an accessible format where they can log in and it's just right there in front of them, where they can pull it and do their own research, outreach, all those things right there, has been a big win. I am something of a new technology cynic in a lot of ways, where new technologies are brought to me and I'm like, it's kind of cool, but where's it actually going to get benefit from it? And I have found, though, with this one, though, that it has been particularly beneficial, because it's the data that you need right there. our teams can log in there and look at it and find that information, and I can kind of help them interpret and understand what's going on. And it's a lot of beyond the other processes. We're meeting regularly as individual teams. So some teams meet once a week, some meet every other week with longer meetings, just kind of depending on the needs of what's going on. Um, it's a lot of different processes, and there we're looking at adding some new committees in-house to look at more of the data a little more directly. I've got some trends that we've pulled that we're starting to look at from several years back and moving forward, just so we can always kind of be ready to see what's going on. The important thing is again, I mentioned time poverty. Our students have limited time, and so do we. And what comes to that is we can come up with a lot of ideas. We can come up with a lot of things to do. Important thing is we got to see, is it actually working? Is it actually doing it? Because it sounds great. We can make up all these ideas, but does it actually work? We were able to get that review done of our orientation data and found that it actually was doing something beneficial. We're starting to collect some more data to where we can look back and say, okay, are these other interventions actually working as well? I think they are. I hope they are. But if they're not, you can't be married to any process if it's ultimately not working. If there's something that could work a little bit better, we've always got to be pushing that envelope.
And I think what you just said is so important. I mean, I was going to reinforce that there are so many things we can do. There are a ton of best practices and strategies and tactics and technologies and approaches that any school can implement. But I think it's understanding what's the right combination for our institution and our students that are actually having an impact on them, and getting visibility into what's actually working can be really tricky and hard. Well, I do think that having that right combination and insight into that right combination of programs, initiatives, policies, approaches, and not only what works for all the students, but like also sometimes what works for particular kinds of students at different points in their lives. You might find differentiation there. Well, we've covered a ton of ground. And so I like to always end by opening up to you if there's any lessons learned or anything that I should have asked you about that I didn't, that you would like to share with others who are doing similar work.
Oh man, okay. That's a good one. I feel like there is in my I've done this 20 plus years now, and it's fun and in a lot of ways. And I feel like going back to the efficiency piece again, we as you make policy, as you make procedures over a university or over a system, you want it to be as easy as possible. You want it to be as like catch-all as you can, but you really can't do that. As far as our approaches, what outcomes, what outreaches are working, even in our department, what's working for our kinesiology team might not necessarily work for our RN to BSN team. So even granularly, you got to have some flexibility there as much as you can. But really, so that's kind of one thing I'm always like, we got to have some understanding of flexibility and customization based on student population needs. But beyond that, really, it comes more of a philosophy in this situation. It's in managing, in leading with a group like this or anywhere else. You have a tension that you live in all the time, and it's the tension between supporting your team and supporting your students. And most of the time, that's a Venn diagram that hopefully is just overlapping perfectly, but it doesn't always. And so you've got to figure out how to live in that tension and do what you can to make sure the students, because again, none of us have a job without the students. The students are our responsibility. They're who we're here to work with. But there is a point where if you fall completely into that, you might start burning out your people if you don't know what's going on. So you got to find a good way to protect both your team, your institution, as well as meeting the students' needs as best as possible. And that tension is going to look different based on your school, based on where you are, based on the day of the week. It could be very different, but being able to comfortably live in that tension, I think, is really what's important. Because again, I feel like people get annoyed with me sometimes in the sense that I'm always going to almost always advocate for whoever's not in the room. So if I'm with some staff or faculty, they're saying things about students, I'm going to tend to advocate for the student and make sure they're getting their voice in there. And if I'm talking to students, I'm going to advocate for the advisor, make sure there's voices in it, just to really make sure everyone's considering it. Because again, we all have very similar goals, but they might diverge a little bit. So just kind of make sure we can live within this and kind of keep that train moving that one way is really important. So trying to live in that and be comfortable with that, have good people to talk to about that, because again, you can drive yourself crazy a little bit with it if you don't really have those conversations. But I think that's really important.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on Next Practices. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great.